And welcome to another episode of DIOTALK. I'm Dio. Let's talk. My guest of the evening is joining us all the way from the UK. He has a brand new book out that's called Real Men Quit. Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome to Duncan Bhaskaran Brown. Welcome to the show, man. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to doing some talking.
Same here. I was looking a little bit about your background. You have this amazing, rich history of overcoming obstacles, challenges, and you've even become a speaker.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I don't know whether I should get too much praise because a lot of the obstacles I overcame, I put in my own way. So, it probably would have just done better not to have put the obstacles in my way to start off with. But yes, I used to drink, smoke, eat junk food, and listen to bad music, and I have cured most of that. I
Wow.
mean, I think I've got over the bad music as well, but my wife would disagree.
Mm. So what inspired this here your story? I'm intrigued to learn what inspired you to write such a great book on basically real men quit. What does that mean?
Yeah, so there's a few things that sort of inspired me to write it. I had a very good friend when I was young. I met him when I was at university, and we spent a lot of our twenties together. And we spent a lot of our twenties together drinking and drinking hard, and it caught up with him. And unfortunately, he died at
Wow.
27.
Sorry for your
And
loss.
that was a really important part of my journey. I didn't stop drinking after he died, and it was totally related to alcohol, but it still didn't stop me drinking. But it was a part of the journey. It was a moment where I kind of made the decision that I was going to change. I mean, I made the decision not to change right then, but I knew at some point that the change was going to come. And I think later on in life, when circumstances led me towards having to really decide what I wanted from life, um, that my experience with him made that a lot easier, and I made the right decision in that. So a lot of it is tied up with him. But since I've stopped drinking, I've done quite a lot of work with a lot of people, and I met one particular guy who really inspired me to write the book because he joined the British Armed Forces. He joined the Royal Marine Commandos, and that's got the longest infantry training course in the world. So you've got to be pretty tough to
Yeah.
get through that. You know, you've got to have a lot of self-control. You've got to have a lot of discipline, and he got through that, and he served with distinction, and it wasn't quite enough for him. So he took the selection course for the Special Boat Service, which is the British equivalent of the Navy SEALs. So it's, the best of the best. And he spent 6 years at the top of his profession. And, you know, they don't just give that away with the cornflakes, do they? To get there, you have to be tough. You have to have self control. You have to have discipline. You have to have what you guys lovingly call intestinal fortitude. I always love that expression. So he was obviously a very, very strong guy, but he got caught with alcohol, and he had everything in his life under control. Since he'd left the forces, he'd started his own business. It was going very, very well. Everything he had under control, apart from the drinking, which he just could not get under control. And it really hit home to me that if somebody like that, somebody with that much strength, self control, and discipline can get caught with alcohol, then we all can. And it's no shame on anybody who gets trapped in it. If somebody like that can get trapped in it, then we all can.
Wow. That's inspiring. It's inspiring but yet tragic at the same time. How long, if I can ask, how long have you been sober?
I've done 8.5 years, although I
Wow.
probably should start saying 8.75 years. It's I, I was thinking about this the other day because my daughter was born almost exactly 9 months after I stopped drinking. So they clearly weren't lying about that fertility bit, were they? Um, and I think she's at the point where it's sort of like she is 7 and 10 months kind of thing. you know. And I don't know whether I should still be quite that bad about it with sobriety. I'm sort of looking forward to getting to 10 years because then I can just go, oh, it's about 10 years and not worry about it too much. But yeah, it'll be 9 years in the end of May.
Wow. Well, congrats. That's a
Thank you.
that's a heavy task to carry.
Yeah, I mean it is and it isn't. The thing is, I think, and my experience of working with quite a lot of people is that stopping drinking, it can have its difficulties,
Mm,
but it is relatively straightforward. It's pretty simple. It's not something that you can just go out and do necessarily, but it's pretty straightforward. With a bit of help and a bit of support, most people can do it. And then staying sober, that's difficult. Again, it's kind of simple. It's not easy, but it is kind of simple. It is kind of straightforward. The kind of things you need to do. But we always know what we should do. We always know
mm,
we should be eating more vegetables and less McDonald's. Do we do it? I don't know. So the thing is, it's not in and of itself actually that hard. It's just made up of a load of little decisions, and you've just got to keep making the right decision. Ultimately, you just got to keep moving forward. And I think I've found it kind of, I mean, there's been challenges, don't get me wrong, but I found it kind of enjoyable just to keep moving forward and think, right, I've solved that problem. I've stopped smoking. What do I do now? What do I do? What's the next thing? And when I get to the point where all I really have to worry about is whether I do my yoga before or after I have my overnight oats, then, I've got it made. I'm not quite there yet, but that's when your problems get like that, you've got it sorted, don't you?
I mean, but you got it's work. It's work, it's consistency, it's wanting to improve and better yourself, which is a quality that you have kept for the last 8, 9 years, which, kudos to you. It's discipline, as you say.
Yeah. No, look, I'd really love to tell everybody that there was like this amazing hack
Mm,
that
mhm.
you could do, and suddenly you'd get all of this stuff, and like, all you need to do is give me $49 a month, and I will share the one big secret, and it will require absolutely no work. I genuinely wish it was like that, but it's not. And I've interviewed so many people who've got sober, really successful people who've, used their sobriety as a springboard to move into business, to excel at sport, to I like a good friend of mine, Nick, is currently rowing the Atlantic. Nutcase, but
Wow.
his sobriety has given him this springboard to go off and like go on these amazing adventures all over the world. And every single one of them says, yeah, you just got to put one foot in the front of the other. You just got to do the work. There's no
Mm.
shortcut. It just got to get up, try and be a bit better than you were yesterday. There's actually not really any mystery to it. It is pretty simple. Not always easy, but it is always
Mm.
simple.
I grew up in a small island called Puerto Rico, and my grandparents, after they moved and retired from here, New Jersey, that I'm located, they opened the bar, and where the bar for, I want to say, 10 years was very successful, but they were massive alcoholics, massive trauma, drug addicts, et cetera, et cetera. Everything you think that was bad was happening, right? Which probably I think that's one of the reasons I'm not a big drinker. And if I do drink, I drink in my house where I feel safe, where I know that, I can, there's no fear around me, right?
Yeah.
And after 10 years, I go back, now I'm married with a child, and I find this gentleman, and where he's older, he's a lot more older, maybe 70s. And I sit down with him and I have this conversation because I know him well growing up in the bar. He was a major drinker, problematic drinker. And we're here joking around, and I ask him, how does it feel being sober? And I'm paraphrasing, right? Because it's he's telling me this in Spanish, and he told me basically, being sober, it's being reminded of every effed up thing you've done in your life and trying to basically just hold yourself accountable and try to do better. In your 10 years, and your I'm sorry, your 8, 9 years you're going, how's it been? How has it been for you being sober?
Yeah, I think you make a really, really good point there that, as drinkers, we all do it because we're trying to run away from something. That might be unprocessed childhood trauma. That's quite common among people who drink heavily. It might be difficult things that have happened in your adult life around employment, relationships, grief, those kind of more kind of adult problems. But it can just be something like relatively simple that you have a bit of social anxiety. That's
Mm.
why it starts out, but it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it starts to affect the small things. You get a little bit stressed because you wake up in the morning not quite yourself, spending a bit more money than you should, so you got a bit less money in your account, things are getting a bit tight, you know you're spending more time drinking than you are nurturing your relationships, and that gets a little bit tight. And that was it for me. There wasn't like one big major thing that I was running away from. I was just trying to run away from a lot of those annoying little things. And absolutely, when I stopped drinking, I had to stand in front of them, and that was kind of annoying to start off with. But as you kind of actually do stand in front of them, you start to realize the size of the problems. And one thing that I have noticed very much is that if you sort of try and ignore your problems, they look a lot bigger. If you actually stand in front of them and actually try and do something about them, they shrink. So if you ignore them, they get bigger. But if you actually look at them and stand in front of them, they get smaller. So actually, the whole idea of running away, it really, really does not work. So for me, the joy of sobriety is the ability to stand in front of my problems. Added to that, it's given me more energy and more focus and a depth of relationships and all of that good stuff. Has made coping with those little difficulties in life so much easier. Like the other day, I got a parking ticket,
Okay.
and it was entirely my fault. I parked somewhere I shouldn't have parked. And I know what would have happened. If I'd have been drinking, I would have told everyone who would have listened how unfair that was. Because it was only 15 minutes before the thing. It was just like, I mean, honestly, don't they have any real crimes to investigate? And I would have like just moaned to everybody that would have listened. I would have
Mm.
contested it. I'd have written to the local council. I'd have written to the president. I'd have written Joe Biden a letter, despite the fact it happened in Oxford. It would have been that bad. And I would have made such a big thing out of it. But, what did I do? I just went, wow, Duncan, you were an idiot. You parked in the wrong place. I sent them off. I gave them the 60 quid or whatever it was. I paid it and it was gone and it was totally forgotten. In fact, I wouldn't even remember it, except I keep using it as an example of how much less stressful my life is. Not because different things happen, but because I react to them in such a different way.
I get it. I get it. So what made you want to call your new book Real Men Quit? What's that about?
It's a kind of a bit of a try and get people thinking and get them to sort of put their back up a little bit. It's like, well, I drink and I'm a real man. What do you mean, Duncan? And to turn I'm quite keen on turning the idea of quitting around. People think, quitting is a bad thing, but I think it's a very, very good thing. But the reason why I wrote it was because there are a lot of amazing women in the sober space. There are a lot of amazing women doing great work. Holly Willoughby and Annie Grace and Claire Pooley and Lisa Stevens, and I could go on and on and on. There's so many amazing women who are telling their stories. They're doing some really good stuff. They're building communities, and they are helping a lot of other women to get sober. And that's great. And I love that and I admire that and I think it's fantastic. But the plain fact is that men are far more likely to have a problem with drinking and they're
Mm.
far less likely to ask for help. And as the sober community, it just does not have very many vocal men in it. And I think we need to stand up for the issues of men in general. And for me, that's standing up and talking about what it means to drink as a man and what it means to get sober as a man.
No, I agree. I concur. I applaud you for that. I think you're hitting, the nail right in the head because there are so many men that are going through something. Doesn't necessarily have to be alcohol, but going through something, whether it's alcohol abuse, drug abuse, mental health issues. They're going through something and there's not enough of men to vocalize that, Women, on the other hand, they're very vocal. They'll tell you what's going on detail by detail, and that's great. But we also need, our side to speak up and start helping, contributing to this cause.
So 120 years ago, women started to organize because, like our grandparents, they were a bit stupid and they didn't let women vote. So, like, great, they needed to organize, and they they managed to get the vote, and they didn't stop there, did they? And brilliant. And like, I'm not saying that the feminist movement has completely achieved all of its goals and it should back up now, but they have done a pretty good job of getting certain issues onto the agenda. So domestic violence is a really, really good example of that. And the conversation around domestic violence is almost exclusively about men committing acts of violence on women. And I know that we both, neither of us are going to support that as an idea. We both condemn that because that is a terrible thing. And we think that that should be brought to light and it should be talked about. Absolutely. But the basic fact is that domestic violence is not just men against women. It's women against women, it's men against men, and sometimes it's women against men. So we need to talk about it in its broader scope. Yet the agenda is dominated because women are much better organized. They're much better at getting those issues onto the agenda. And it's true in sobriety, and it's true in a lot of other issues. So come on, guys. Women have been organizing for 120 years, and what we've been doing is sitting in the bar, drinking beer, eating nuts, and talking about football. Like, it's time to actually do something, fellas.
No, I agree. I agree. I think there's a table and women like men both can contribute.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we are always stronger together. And yeah, I think uh, we need just a more balanced discussion, and we need to bring the kind of things to light that society would rather not focus on. And alcohol as a problem is something that people generally don't want to talk about
Yeah.
because quite a lot of people drink more alcohol than they should, and they know they do. They and they don't want to talk about it. They want to talk about the supposed health benefits of red wine, which are almost entirely fictitious. But they want to talk about that because it
Yeah.
makes them feel better
Yeah.
about drinking wine.
Yeah. It's more easier, and I'm only assuming, right? It's more easier to just go to a liquor store or a bar, order a beverage and drink, than actually sit there with somebody, figure out how you're feeling, and put words that you still have not yet to develop to tell someone how you're feeling and what's going on with you.
Yeah, and I think
But it's
you know,
work. Everything is
yeah,
work.
and I think we as men we don't always get the greatest start with that. With there's often this kind of idea when we're growing up that we've got to just be tough and we can't cry. You know, boys don't cry.
Mm,
You know, we just
yeah.
got to be tough. We just got to get on with it, and that doesn't help. And I think the other thing is that actually if you give men the space and you give them the time and you actually listen to them, they are reasonably good at beginning to talk. They might not always have the words to describe emotions. We tend to either be angry or annoyed.
Hmm.
We don't necessarily go into the full range of emotions, but at the end of the day, we are reasonably good at talking about it if we are given the space. Problem is that we don't often give each other the space. I
Mm.
don't think men are actually that bad at talking. I think the problem is we're quite bad at listening. So we don't give each other the opportunity to talk through these things. If you start talking about something serious, they'll just, we just make a joke of it, don't we? And we just sort of like, shut up. I want to watch the football.
Yeah, they want something to essentially numb them, but also it's that vulnerability. It gets real quick.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's something that I come across an awful lot, that people they believe when they start drinking that it's helping them to express themselves and it's helping them to be more outgoing. But the more they drink, the less they feel like themselves. And eventually, after we've talked about it a little bit and we've gone through it, they start to realize that it's stopping them being who they are. It's stopping them express themselves in an authentic way. And again, I've interviewed an awful lot of people who've got sober, and it is amazing to see when they do reconnect with themselves, when they really discover meaning and purpose and things like that, and they go on and create these amazing groups and businesses and experiences. And it's just fantastic to watch people flourish when they are doing something that they really really genuinely love doing, rather than just trying to distract themselves, trying to numb themselves.
Yeah, yeah. In your area, because I know you're in UK over there. How's the support when it comes to men regarding that? Is there is there men actually doing speaking up, supporting, or it's still we're still down. We're still going through it.
Yeah, I mean, we are a bit rubbish. We are getting better. Um, there are more and more groups for men that are popping up all over the place. Good grassroots movements. Just somebody they have had a problem. They looked for some support for it. They couldn't find it. They solved the problem themselves, and then they want to provide that for other people who are suffering what they are. So yeah, I mean, things are definitely getting better. There is an awful long way to go, and I think there's a lot of little bits that are
Mhm.
happening here and there. I think we just need to be much more concerted, we need to be much more organized about it. We need to make more of a shout about International Men's Day, which is the 19th of November. And, I think that's a great opportunity to actually get it on the agenda. And I think things are changing. Then they're not changing quick enough. There are still a lot of problems in society. But
I agree.
yeah, there
Yeah,
there are people who are speaking up. We
I
just need
agree.
more.
Yeah, I think I think we as men at times we're very undervalued. Um, I think we get a lot of grief because our track record hasn't been the greatest, you know. But there are, you know, some like us that are trying, just trying. It's not about whether succeeding or achieving a goal, even a purpose. We're just trying. And I think that's not just having this conversation. It's not just happening like here in America where um, media is all time high and where brainwashing and you know, unvaluable topics are being presented. So I think you're doing a great job, and keep grinding, keep pushing.
Yeah, thanks, man. I mean that is it. I mean that is the lesson that I learned with sobriety. It's the lesson that really is at the heart of
Mhm.
the book, Real Men Quit. It is very simple. How do you win the Super Bowl? You throw the ball and you run a bit, and then you throw the ball and you run a bit more, and you throw the ball and you run a bit more. And if you sort of think about it like in this massive sense of like, oh my God, I've got to win the Super Bowl, then you're never going to do it, are you? But if you think about it as just like, well, I just got to run that route. That's it. I got to run the route that's in front of me. And if you can do that, it's manageable. And that is how change happens. Lots of people doing lots and lots of little things that seem mundane and seem utterly unimportant, but put together, things change. And we have beaten industries that have been trying to sell us poison. We we have not entirely destroyed the tobacco industry or the nicotine industry, and they're 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 hanging on as best they can, but we have completely and utterly changed the narrative around smoking, and that was just a lot of people, doing what was in front of them every day, putting one foot in front of the other, and that really changed things. And smoking, the attitude towards smoking in my lifetime has changed enormously. And I think that still in my lifetime, the attitude towards alcohol is going to change. I think in 20 years' time, people will look at alcohol a lot more like they look at cigarettes today.
Mm, I agree. What are some, without giving too much detail, what are some things that we can find in your book that would help the let's say someone who's just thinking about getting sober but doesn't have, you know, the proper knowledge or just doesn't know how to.
Well, I mean, the good news is that the most common way to get sober is actually without any sort of like formal support. I mean, everybody thinks that you either have to go to AA or
Mm.
rehab to get sober. And look, I mean, don't get me wrong, AA do a lot of good work, and there are a lot of amazing rehabs in America. But about 45% of people that stop drinking entirely on their own without any formal support. I mean, sometimes they read books. Hopefully, from now on, they're going to read Real Men Quit, even the women. Um, I think knowing that actually, having the permission to do it on your own is quite important. But at the heart of my method is getting to grips with the beliefs. So a lot of the book is about saying, all right, why do you believe alcohol makes you tough? Why do you believe alcohol makes you sophisticated? The short answer is you've seen a load of sports people advertising alcohol, and that kind of idea of strength and toughness has sort of rubbed off on the alcohol. That's um, why alcohol companies spend so much money sponsoring American football, for example. Why do you think? Why do you believe alcohol makes you look sophisticated? Because you've watched too many Bond movies, my friend. You know. So we just get to grips with all of those beliefs, and once you've brought the beliefs around alcohol to light, once you've asked yourself whether they're true, whether once you've asked yourself whether they're serving you or not, once you've got rid of all of the unhelpful stuff, then actually the behavior is pretty easy. There are a few tips and tactics around managing your thoughts and things like that, but actually you get to grips with your beliefs, the thoughts follow and the behavior follows. Problem is, most people try and do it the other way around. They try and change the behavior and hope the thoughts and the beliefs will catch up, which they rarely do. So Real Men Quit does it the right way around. Start with the beliefs, get the thoughts in place, and then stop drinking.
So that this book is basically you're advising the process you went through on how to find your sobriety.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's in essence the process that I went through with more jokes. Not all of them are good. They're regular jokes. They're not all funny, but they do come along like buses.
While you were writing this, were there any triggers or memories that gave you some challenges to write it?
Yeah, so I mean, I wrote a lot about my friend John, who sadly passed away, and that was one of those poignant sort of experiences,
Mm,
wasn't it? There was a lot of sadness in kind of revisiting that, but there was also quite a lot of comfort in it that it helped me to think through what had gone on and my role in it, and you know, I think I genuinely believe that very few people are either really stupid or bad. I think most people just make mistakes because they have a limited awareness. Most people are genuinely trying to do their best. They just lack the understanding to do a better job. And if we sort of like look at them as being bad or stupid, then we are doing them a great disservice. And even worse than that, it tends to rub off. We tend to look at ourselves and we tend to think that our actions were motivated by stupidity or evil or something like that. And
mm.
trust me, you are not bad. You are not stupid. You just approached it with the understanding you had at the time. And that's what I really learned from kind of getting to grips with everything that happened with John. And that's that's a load of really free therapy for me. And if I can help other people start to understand that and get to that point, then yeah, all of the time I spent writing it was definitely worth it. So yeah, it was difficult, but worth it.
That's the most important part. When you finish writing it, was there one person in particular you was like, hey, read this, let me know what you think? And if so, what was that feedback like?
So I've been writing for a while, and I'm quite lucky to have a good network of other writers and friends who are quite understanding, and a lot of kind of speakers and trainers and coaches and experts that I've worked with in the past. So I sent it off to about 60, 70 people, uh, not when it was completely finished, but when it was towards the end of
The
of,
hard
of it
draft,
finishing.
rough draft.
Yeah, yeah. So it was about draft five, I think that was, and I got an awful lot of feedback. Some of which was really useful, some of which I totally ignored, some of which was contradictory. I always love that when you get one person who says, I really love that bit, and then somebody else says, I really hate that bit. And you think, oh, well, I've just got to make up my own mind, haven't I? But I did get a couple of people who um, sort of got about halfway through it and then sort of said, well, I quite liked it, but for some reason I didn't want to finish reading it. And I was like, well, maybe we should have a conversation about it. Maybe it would be better to do it in person and see how you're feeling around that. So I think I probably did accidentally trigger a few people and make them think a little bit. But on the flip side, a couple of people that I sent it to just because I was interested in their opinions actually stopped drinking as a result of reading it, which was quite nice. I was
That's a
like, oh,
win.
it does actually work, then that's good.
I mean, it's your story. It's people sometimes have the misconception of understanding that your story is your story, not theirs. And your view on certain things and certain experience that you live through is not the same as theirs. So I think people just lack sometimes, empathy or understanding.
Yeah, yeah, and I I think uh, there is there is often a lot of criticism of other methods in the sober community. And I get why people are like that. I mean, I genuinely think stopping drinking saved my life.
Mhm.
I know I was smoking, eating badly, drinking heavily, very stressed, knocking on for 40, and that's just heart attack territory, isn't it? So if I hadn't have done something about my life, I don't think it's too much of an exaggeration to say I could have been dead by now.
Yeah.
So yeah, getting sober, I can make the argument that it saved my life. And there are many people who got a lot closer to it and they got sober. And for them and for me, it's just such a great gift. So any method that can help you change your life to that extent is going to be something you're going to be quite keen on. You're going to value that method, but and that's great, and I totally understand why that is. But what you find is some people get so focused on the method that they use to stop drinking, they start to criticize all of the other methods. And what I think we need to realize as a community is that everybody approaches stuff differently. And
Mm,
something that worked for you is not necessarily going
correct.
to work for somebody else. And we therefore need to have a more integrative approach. We need to approach it the way that we basically need to be more like MMA.
Yeah.
Because before MMA, all the karate guys were going, no, karate is the best martial art, and all the kickboxers were going, no, kickboxing, and the boxers were going, boxing. And as it turns out, it was Brazilian jiu-jitsu. The thing is, they all had their approaches, but nobody really knew which was the most effective until they all got into a ring and sorted it out the
Mm,
good old fashioned way. And I think there's a lot of that in the sober community now. People are standing over here shouting, my way's the best. People say, my way's the best. And what we need to do is we need to integrate it. We need to
mm.
work out what each method does well, how it serves each individual person, and then find the right method for people. Because ultimately, getting people sober, getting them to a point where they can really flourish and enjoy their life, that is far more important than clinging to some dogma about an approach.
I agree. Duncan, you're a total badass. I admire you and respect you because you're a true contributor to progress.
Yes, man,
What
and I am a badass. I'm going to
yes, you
totally
are.
own that.
Yeah, you are. I mean, it takes balls. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of strength to just stop because you want better for yourself. Just stop because you don't want to you don't want a dad 40. Just stop because you want to have better memorable memories with your wife, with your kids, with friends. You stop because you want to have a better experience. That's the one thing a lot of people lack of is accountability. You're setting yourself accountable.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit on something that I've always believed about courage and sacrifice. So I spent 10 years as a volunteer firefighter,
Mm,
and you sort of like everybody, they all want the stories about kicking indoors and running into burning buildings
yeah.
and pulling beautiful women out. And yeah, obviously I did loads and loads of that, but I mean, mostly it's very, very boring. And mostly the sacrifice you make is not, the sacrifice that firefighters make is rarely actually giving up their lives in burning buildings and dying. I mean, firefighters do die on the job,
Yes.
but that is pretty rare. The sacrifice that firefighters generally make is just, it's inconvenient. You end up on this big job, which is a lot of standing around and absolutely no glamour, and the food isn't any good either. And because you're there for, 8, 10 hours at a stretch, you've missed that thing that you want to do in the evening. You've missed half the night's sleep. You've still got to get up for work the next morning, even though you're not getting into bed till 4 in the morning or something like that. You're only getting a couple of hours sleep. That's the sacrifice. That is the courage. The courage to actually show up and do that. That is courage. It's not the big kind of thing. It's not dying in the building. That's not courage. Courage is just making those tiny sacrifices every single day.
Mm, yeah. Showing up, being consistent.
Yeah, it's the it's the secret. Far too many people they try something and it doesn't immediately bring them results, so they just give up.
Yeah.
And yeah, most things will not bring you immediate results. Most things you have to actually put in a little bit of time with before you start to see the fruit. Although, to be honest with you, I felt better the day after I stopped drinking. I felt even better the day after that. Because honestly, if you stop putting large quantities of poison into your body, you do feel
Yeah.
better quite quickly. That said, another thing that nobody ever talks about in the sober community is that between 3 months and 15 months, most people have a fairly significant dip. So they get that enjoyable bit when they stop drinking, and it feels good to start off with. But invariably,
Mm.
whatever they're trying to escape from by drinking, they have to stand in front of it. And that is difficult. Whether that is emotional or practical, it's still difficult. And it gives you this kind of like dip in satisfaction. And that's why I'm so keen to work with people on a much longer term basis. I
Mm-hmm.
know I'd get you sober in a couple of hours if you really, really want to, but it's working with you over the long term to get you through that dip so that you can get out the other side. And the research is fairly clear. If you can get out the other side of that dip, if you can get to about 2 years, in general, your life satisfaction will keep going up, and it will keep going up, and it will keep going up. And literally, the research has been done on people who've been sober for 40 years, and they're still reporting increased life satisfaction after 40 years. So the only way to really know that is to do 40 years of sobriety. So I reckon let's stick a date in the diary about 2056. Shall we do another one of these?
Sure.
See how much I'm enjoying 40 years of sobriety.
Sure, sure. It'll be an honor. Yeah, it only takes one day, and then the next day, and then the next day. It's I tell everyone you gotta this life is such a tricky way, right? I'm like Frank Miller's Batman, The Dark Knight, and we're like, I want to get after it. Once you find that and you go after it, like you went after your sobriety, like you continue going after your sobriety, and you keep continue, you just want more and more and more, and the higher you get, the less you're willing to settle for something that's not valuable. So once again, I repeat myself, you're a total badass, and you're doing it.
Thank you, man. I'm sticking that on my business cards.
Hey, whatever works. Duncan, it's been an honor speaking to you. Before we go, please tell everyone where they can find your book, social media, but also you're doing a giveaway.
Yeah, so if you want to get a copy of Real Men Quit, it's on Amazon. Pretty easy to find. Stick Real Men Quit into the internet, and you'll come up with something. That said, if you want to read the book that I wrote a couple of years ago, it's called Get Over Indulgence, which is really my story about stopping smoking, drinking, taking junk food, and all of the bad stuff. It's quite short. That's the best thing about it. So if you put getover.uk into the internet, that'll take you to a bit of my website where you can get a PDF copy or a Kindle version, or you can download the audiobook. If you can stand to listen to me for just under 3 hours, doing some really dodgy, silly voices as well, I'll apologize for that now, but you can have the audiobook for free. That's getover.uk. That, as I say, that will take you to a bit of my website. You can download the book from there. But also, that's my website. So you can find me on all of the socials. We're quite busy on LinkedIn. We do a lot of work with businesses at the moment. What I've found is a lot of businesses, they all have well-being programs these days. Very few of them have got anything to do with alcohol. So we plug that particular gap. That's what we do on LinkedIn. But Instagram and Facebook, if you're just interested in me going on about how great being sober is, and how to achieve it. Although, to be fair, I do talk quite a bit these days about moderating your drinking and finding a way of reducing the harm of alcohol. So that's what we do on Facebook and Instagram. So yeah, I'm basically really easy to find if you can spell Bhaskaran Brown. But if you can't, just put getover.uk into Google and you'll find me.
Boom, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Go check him out. Go follow him. Go get his book right now. Go support him. Go hit him up if you need any advice. He's more than willing to advise you. Make sure to go follow me on Instagram at Mr.JimInspire10. Go follow me everywhere on Facebook. Make sure you like and subscribe the YouTube channel, DIOTALK TV. Go to dreaminspire10.com and get that new merch. I got new merch. Ladies and gentlemen, Duncan, it's been an honor. Have a good night, guys. I'm out.